Welcome to Carolina Sculpture Studio. My name's Clint Button, and I'm a granite sculptor. Welcome to video number 127 of the virtual stone carving apprenticeship. All right, you know, 2 steps forward and 1 step back. Still cutting on the stone here, but we had a project come up in town. I had to go panel a die, and studio's full, so I ran into M&R Granite, a local retailer that, you know, they're fantastic. I love working with them. They got an old shed that's it's just the real thing. It isn't a new modern plant. It's a real granite shed, wood beam crane and everything. So, but anyways, I had to go in and panel a die. And while I was in there, I'd mentioned some of the rubber work and how you do your pattern, your template for sandblast, and then you can also use it for laying out rubber for doing hand cut letters. So while I was in there, I shot some video, and Jeff said that it's the correct name for the machine is a Die Stencil Cutter. That's what this press is for. But they've got one they've had for decades, and it's been there, done it. It's a real thing. It's done thousands and thousands of stones, and they have a pretty extensive, supply of font, type. It's like a typeset, old typeset press. You take your specific individual characters, whether it's a letter or a numeral, or you may have a little Landau scroll, or you may have a pattern for a rose that you're gonna either just sandblast, or you may do for layout for shape carving. Usually it's just for smaller stuff. But you could buy, there was just a huge range of them. And every once in a while you find an old monument shop that's selling out, or somebody that bought one and they're retiring and they don't need it anymore. And it's pretty cool. So I got a little bit of video here and show you the rubber, show you, how the Die Stencil Cutter works, and then talk a little bit more about the rubber there down in the shed. So take a look at this, and we'll be back here in a few minutes. Okay, I mentioned doing rubber and doing layout and pressing it and doing your template, everything. These are all letters. They all have a place where they go. Like there's an 8. So you can do all your layout. Here's some of the rubber that I described with the plastic film on the back, rubber on the front. And you'll take a piece of this rubber, just that's loose, and you would literally lay it on here, just like that. You use a center finding rule, measure it out, lay it out, put your letters on the way you want. And then once all the letters are in place, you very carefully take this back panel, you lay it down on top of the letters, hang this back up because it's still good, but you'll lay this down, and then you literally will just run this switch and feed it through one way, and you push this in and it'll squeeze it right here. It comes out here, and then you can roll it back the other way and roll it back, and then you pick your thing back up, and you'll pick your letters off your rubber, and your rubber will all be stamped and pressed through it, and it'll cut most of it. It won't necessarily cut every bit of it, and that's why you take a stencil knife and you go through and weed it. But this was high tech versus doing it completely by hand. But this is at a retail shop here locally. You can see they've got quite a collection of older letters there. Those are the old metal letters. There's even some vellum tracing paper, and they'll have different details, but this is all related to generally for sandblast. And you can do this layout for hand cut letters. But just thought I'd give you a little excursion right here and show you what I talked about. So that's how you do the rubber layout in a monument shop. Before you have a computer printer plotter or whatever to do it. So this is down here at M&R Granite. So thanks, Jeff and Trey. Back to the studio. Before we run back to the studio, here's some rubber that's been laid out, and I assume this has been done with the plotter. These are big rubber stencils to do some layout on the stone. And before somebody asks, this is the rubber. You see where they blew it? See how the heat? This is what it looks like when you start. Okay? And when you blow it, it ends up darkening it up. That's what they blew through. And you see on the back, you see this yellow? This is the plastic film that I was talking about. And that holds the rubber pieces in place as they're cut through by the die cutter. So you can pick them out, and when you sandblast, it blows away, and any of that plastic that's left, it just eats it right up. Okay? So there's the quick down and dirty on doing rubber. When you save all these little pieces to patch and use. Okay, a couple of things that I didn't mention in doing the video. There's here at the end of the last video, you can see where it says father. Try to put it on the screen here, where they actually put the rubber on a stone that was already cut, and they just rubbed it in order to produce the outline. Now, if you're reproducing a stone where you're only changing maybe, maybe you blew it wrong, you had a failure, you had just one thing that didn't come out right, or you're changing a date on a stone, you have to put a new stone in, because there were a number of those back around the turn of the century when we went to 2000. One good friend, my grandfather's first girlfriend from back when they were in kindergarten to the first grade, lived next door to my grandmother there in North Berry Manor. And Aurora was kind of disgusted because she had lived so long. And she was, she says it's sad because everybody dies. All you do is go to funerals, and it gets smaller and smaller and smaller until you're the only one that's left. But they had done her stone pre-need, many years ago. She used to be in the monument business. They had a monument company, and they'd put 19 for her death date, and we're going to blow the last two letters in. Well, they had to put it. She didn't die until like 2004 or something, so they had to change the stone. Sometimes you'll blow a whole new stone. Sometimes you'll just fill the letters and service them in place. It depends on the customer. But you can take the rubber and lay it on an existing stone that's blown, just like you would with regular paper, and rub it, and it'll create the outline, highlight the outline of those letters. And so then you can take your stencil knife and just cut them out. You don't have to go back onto the machine and try to lay everything out exactly right. Excuse me. You don't have to lay everything out perfect. You can match it to the stone right there. So anyways, but that's one more way of doing it. I didn't ask them to take a piece to come here to show you how to transfer the letters by rubbing the paper and everything, because you save all those small pieces to patch up anything that's not been heated or thermaled or blown, that you've not blown on. You trim it off. That stuff all gets patched up around the edges when you're doing just quick work. Like the panel that I did, Jeff wanted it axed. We got it leveled really great. And he says, I'm just going to take it and frost it off anyways, just so it matches the rest of the stone, because the other panel that we didn't change was already frosted. And if you have one that's axed and one that's frosted, it really stands out. So by having them the same, texture, it makes them look. And so he'll just take some of that waste scrap rubber, because the rubber is expensive, and they'll just patch up around the edge. I've even seen sandblast booths where somebody will have a sandblast booth that's like walled with plywood, and they take all the rubber that they peel off and they stick it and glue it on the wall to help it resist the sand, so it lasts a long time. So this is all about money. It's about making sure you take care of your money. And before I start cutting and putting all my stuff back together and hooking up my hand machines and getting everything ready, you got to think about something when you're doing site work. Okay, whenever you get called to go do a job and you're going to go, quote it, or you're going to actually go cut it and service it, it takes time to break down your tool, take the hand machines off and sharpen a bunch of chisels and get everything ready and load the truck, drive to town. And then after you're done doing the work actually on site, then you have to load everything back into your truck and drive back home and unload and set everything up. It's real common for me when we do a show or an event and we take a tent, we set up, some easels and some different models and stuff like that. It's real easy for me to spend at least a day. I'll spend a good 4 hours a lot of times getting everything sorted and organized and loading the truck. And then when I come home and break it down, I have to spend that much more time unloading the truck and putting everything back in place so I can go back to work. So when you start quoting work and you start pricing work, to go do these panels, I had 2 or 3 hours in cutting this panel, do this panel work. But I also had about an hour of taking the studio apart and putting the studio back together that you've got to include on your quotes. You don't have to, but you should. It's just wise business. That's why having a reasonable price is good. But if you start selling yourself short and you get called off on a lot of different directions like that, and you end up losing an hour or two on every job, it'll add up in your bottom line and you won't make any money. So think about that, when you start doing it, and you be generous with it and you can figure out what works, but there's got to be something for what it takes. There's some offset for what it takes for you to leave your building, what it takes for you to get ready, carry all your tools to the job site, if that's not what you normally do. And then when you get done, you have to come back and put everything back. So make sure you charge for it. Include it in your numbers one way or the other, because you need to be consistent. And if you don't charge for it and then all of a sudden you go up on your price by, a significant percent, you may lose a customer. All right, so back to cutting. As I'm putting these back together, I talk about these bushings and how important they are, because they keep the threads in the back of your machine from being eroded as this loosens up and goes back and forth. And the problem really becomes an issue if you use a steel nipple from this directly in here. You tighten this in crazy tight into the machine, and then you use a brass one. I recently replaced the brass nipple on this hose. I had to put a new lead because I had a hole pop, and I put a new nipple in there as well. And you can see this is the same fitting, the same everything. This is how much the threads will deform and wear out. You have to keep tightening it tighter and tighter. See how this one's buried right in this fitting? And this new one is still thick enough that it's got about a 1/4 inch of thread showing. And as I use this and tighten it, it'll deform those threads until I can turn it till it gets tight, and it ends up being completely flush like that. This one we'll use for a little while longer, and then I'll have to replace it. This is your sacrificial point right here in these tools, and then nobody ever tells you that. That's why I'm showing you this. And but this is another reason, because of this abuse. This is why I don't like the quick release fittings right here. If you want to put a quick release, put it on a whip, put it further up your hose, up here somewhere, maybe up near your valves, and then it doesn't suffer the vibration and the damage, and they'll last longer. They won't fail. But that's how much this will deform, over a period of, time, how long, a few months, whatever, of use, until it tightens in all the way. Okay? Use them careful, protect your machines. That's what they're for. As you're working points, you're going to start to really understand where the next point should be when you're looking at your model and you've shot several in that area. If you don't find that point the way you think it should pop up, because you've already shot 2 or 3 or 4 points, in that same area, and you've seen how the lines come together into agreement, and you're used to it. If you have one that doesn't move the right way, just stop and double check your triangle, your compasses, because you can have one that's just a tiny bit off. I just shot this point here, and this one that I shot from down by her foot, down off the plinth, was off by, oh, just a tiny amount. It wasn't off by a lot. A fat pencil line, that's about it on the triangle when I expanded it. And they just weren't, this one wasn't moving the way I wanted it to. It should have already advanced. I was at the right elevation where I should be hitting it. So I checked it. I double checked all three of them just to make sure, but I found that discrepancy in one compass, and I fixed it, and it moved it a lot. Like all of a sudden it moved it over a lot. So before you get to that, you know, do or die, make a mistake point, if you don't think that compass is right, check it. And check all of them to see. And get into the habit while you're working, especially when you're doing rough out stuff. It's not that big a deal because you're roughing out, and all it's going to do is cost you a chisel. But when you start trying to shoot accurate stuff or do good work, whenever you pick up a chisel, as you pop it into your hand machine, pick it up and give it a glance and look at the edge and look for chips. Especially if you've been doing rough out work and now you're going into other. Get in the habit of just glancing at it and just making sure that the edge is straight, smooth, curved, it's straight, the corners are there, whatever. Because if you have a chip or an irregularity and you layer it into the work, that may cause a problem in the stone immediately, or that chip may allow that chisel to really fail as you're pushing, and then that causes a bigger blowout. So just get in the habit just glancing at it, and every once in a while you'll see there's just a little chip, and just go over the wheel, zip zip, and dress it right up, clean it up. But check your compasses, because once in a while you'll have one that's off by just a tiny bit, and those lines, you'll be going away and you say, man, those lines should have hit already, because I'm close enough. I know from different points where I'm at that I should be there. As I'm advancing, I'm trying to level this down. I'm tipping this edge to keep this beveled so there's no risk here. I could go ahead and saw in, you know, a little bit all the way down and do it. Just do it as I go. But as soon as I can get this down to where I can bevel that down to the red line, that's what I'm doing. So I've got that edge really secure. Trying to stay above the red line and not go through it, so I've still got that little bit to clean off, because we've got an 8-inch side right here that we've got to try to preserve. Okay, and, you know, I really don't want to have to figure out something because we knocked a big hole in. All right, back to cut. I'm really liking working the triangle the way I'm doing it now. So take the measurement, let's show you again. Same caliper, go in the corner of this triangle, the bottom corner. Mark it, swing it, strike our line. Got a nice swipe right there. Hang that up. Take our job caliper. We go right here. That's it. You can always double check if you're concerned. To mark the right one. Put a line across it. Make sure I'm right where it needs to be. I got my job caliper. Works really good. I think it's a lot faster. Now the next one. The nice thing about these beam calipers is that when they get to be articulated too much, or in a way you don't like them, You just move them. And now this is the same basic range, you know, as an old composite. See how this one looks. We're measuring on here. Same thing with the wrench. Wrench makes it really nice. A lot better than fiddling with a pair of pliers or a leatherman. Now you take this and enlarge. I've mentioned this before. The depending on your rubber and your mother and everything, you may have some deflection or things that move around, especially with the background and the straight edge. These wing detail is going to be a little bit closer to the edge. Some of it may be pretty much flush with the edge once I carve the feathers. Because on the model, it had a deflection where it curved outward instead of this edge that we're facing right here being perfectly straight and vertical. From the joint, this is exaggerated, but it bulges out, so it's higher, it's further out here. So that's going to move the detail. The detail is the important part. We got it set up enough to where it's not going to run off the stone, but it's, you know, it won't be quite as far inboard, and that's not a big problem. So, but that's pretty normal. And the reality is I'd rather have extra material on the other side of her to produce a more dramatic big die than to get her pushed as far over as possible, because you're better off to have a little extra material in case you have to push her over. So, but we'll lay this out. This next point, just about, we're really close. These, because we're getting into detail, as we get more into detail, you can't always shoot just the high points, but there's going to be points you have to shoot low. So you have to, once you get a better understanding of how you do this, you can shoot points that are a little more captured or restricted down in terms of detail, and then you won't erode the material around it away in a way that's detrimental to the job. All right, back to carving. Almost perfect. Before I cut it any deeper, this shoulder here on the outside, there was interference and it was ramping out. So I'll wipe it down and I'll check it one more time because it's really close. But this one's going to continue to travel that way. I'll show you. See how they stripe? Now, this line is pretty definitive. This stripe from above, but these two are going to move closer together. So we've got to go down just a little bit, and we'll just focus really on this line here that's struck from her knee, because we know that's more definitive than these two. We want to be pretty localized here and do more of a small hole than to knock this whole area in. So to do that, I'll use a smaller half round, round chisel. Sometimes you'll have a little bit of room where you can put some plaster beside it. They move some, but they're still not there yet. Still getting some interference on the side. See? Go out on the end of your machine, push. Don't squeeze it. Just go out on the end of your machine like I was just doing. Boy, those are close. You really want as little plaster as you possibly can use. These lines are just perfectly on top of each other. That looks good. Double check it. Just a tiny bit on that edge. Yep, those are great. Check this out. And that's just barely not touching everywhere. So when I sink that hole and I shoot that point right there, I make a little divot, they'll all fit perfect. And that's really what you want. If you make them cross perfect, where they cross should be it, and you can't put a point there. Put your red dot. That's kind of good. Check them all. Perfect fit. Perfect fit. Perfect fit. Yeah, that's just nice. I've been debating whether I should try to do a point start to finish, like measure on the model and expand everything and do it all. It's pretty redundant to do it, and it would eat up the majority of a video, and I don't know that it would. I think probably if I had a cameraman follow me, it might be easier to digest it. But I think I'm going to have to put together so many pieces of video that I don't know it's going to work. If it's something y'all really want, tell me in the comments, whatever, and we'll try to do it. But I'm just going to keep shooting these points, and it's nice to do. Now I can contour this a little bit, but I mainly just want to have a stripe for these feathers because they're going to undulate and whatever. We don't want to make a smooth plane. We want to leave plenty of material so we can sort of be artistic and have fun with it. That's a big part of it. So we'll keep laying out more feathers. I'll saw some more off here and we'll just keep going. The main thing we got to keep track of is that because that feather detail's over, and we're right here, we're right about at the surface. We should be fine, but anywhere as we go, we need to make sure that we try to measure so that we've got the kind of margin that we want. Because if this edge is 2 inches, that's plenty to have a nice square edge to where it starts and goes down and curves into the niche. The more the feathers are out over it, the less digging there is, and the less the reinforcement can look different. So it may even benefit the job. We just have to make sure we don't dig way out here. But at this point, this is at or just above this 8-inch level from the back, and that's really what we want. So we're in good shape. Keep going. Well, I think it's time to wrap this video up. Making decent progress, getting down here towards the plinth with her wings. These feathers are going to be pretty much right out to the end, but we've got some overlap here at the end, so I may be able to carry it beyond the edge of that. Just to break that line, it'll also reinforce that just a little bit, because this is where our plinth is going to be. So anyways, that's just a little visual just to catch it. So we'll see how that works out, whether it works or not, because we've got this much to deal with, just a tiny bit. All right. My name's Clint Button. I'm a granite sculptor here at Carolina Sculpture Studio with the virtual stone carving apprenticeship. Thanks for coming in.